Imagine walking away from $1 million, not because you had to, not because something better came along, but because saying yes would have meant bowing down to someone who never believed in you. That's the kind of decision most people only dream about making. Caitlin Clark actually made it, and when she did, it sent a shockwave through women's basketball that nobody saw coming, least of all the man who started it all with a phone call he never bothered to make. This isn't a story about money. It isn't even really a story about basketball. It's a story about power, about who holds it, who loses it, and what happens when someone builds so much of their own that the old guard suddenly needs them more than they ever needed the old guard. To understand how we got here, you have to go back to the beginning, back to a teenage girl from Des Moines, Iowa, who had one dream and one destination in mind. Every kid with serious basketball talent in this country grows up knowing one name above all others: UConn, Geno Auriemma, the dynasty that turned women's college basketball into something the whole country had to pay attention to. Diana Taurasi came out of there. Maya Moore, Breanna Stewart. The list reads like a Hall of Fame exhibit because that's exactly what it is. For a young Caitlin Clark, UConn wasn't just a school, it was the finish line. The place where greatness went to get. Confirmed. So when recruiting season rolled around and Clark was already turning heads with a scoring ability nobody had seen at her age, everything pointed towards Storrs, Connecticut, except it never happened. Not because Clark wasn't good enough, not because she chose somewhere else first. It didn't happen because Geno Auriemma never made the call. His staff made some light contact through her AAU coach. A message here, a casual check-in there. But Geno himself, he never picked up the phone. He never spoke to her parents. He never sat across from her and said, "We want you here." And when people asked him about it later, his answer was stunning. He said he had already committed to Paige Buckers and didn't want 2-point guards in the same class. Fine, that's a coaching decision. You can debate it, but you can understand it. What you can't quite let go of is what he said next. He suggested that if Clark really wanted UConn, she should have called him. Read that again. The most powerful recruiter in women's college basketball, a man who had spent 4 decades identifying elite talent before anyone else even knew their names, looked at the best prospect in the country and said the burden was on her to chase him down. She was 17 years old. And in that moment, without even realizing it, Geno Auriemma handed Caitlin Clark the one thing that would fuel everything that followed: motivation. Not the loud kind, not the kind that gets posted on a locker room wall, the quiet kind, the kind that hardens inside you and never fully goes away. Clark went to Iowa instead, and the people who didn't know better called it a consolation prize. Iowa wasn't UConn. It didn't have the banners or the mystique or decades of built-in credibility. What it had was Lisa Bluter, a coach who looked at Clark and didn't ask her to fit into a system. She built the system around her. That difference, as simple as it sounds, changed everything. At UConn, Clark would have been one piece of a machine that had been running long before she arrived and would keep running long after she left. At Iowa, she was the machine. Bluter handed her the keys on day one and trusted her completely. That kind of trust is rare, and for someone who had just been told by the game's biggest name that she wasn't worth a direct phone call, it meant everything. What followed wasn't gradual, it was immediate and relentless. Clark's freshman year, she averaged over 26 points a game and made everyone around her question why they hadn't been paying closer attention. By her sophomore season, she was leading the entire nation in scoring and dragging Iowa into conversations the program hadn't been part of in decades. Games that used to be half empty started filling up, then selling out weeks in advance. People weren't just showing up to support Iowa, they were showing up to see her. The clips spread everywhere. A three-pointer launched from so far out, it looked like a different sport. Another one, then another. Her range wasn't just impressive, it was theatrical. It made people stop scrolling. It made them hit share. It made them show their friends who had never watched a women's basketball game in their lives. And suddenly those friends were watching every week. Her junior year, she broke the NCAA Division I all-time scoring record, passing Kelsey Plum and putting her name above every player, man or woman, who had ever stepped on a college court. That moment was historic by any measure. For Clark, it was a Tuesday. The 2023 championship game between Iowa and LSU drew nearly 10 million viewers. Historic numbers. Numbers that made executives at ESPN sit up straight and start paying very close attention. Then came 2024, the rematch. 18.7 million people watched, more than most men's college basketball games, more than events that had been cultural institutions for decades. The sport didn't gradually climb to that level. It exploded there, and the explosion had one epicenter. Through all of it, Geno watched from a distance, and instead of doing what most people with any self-awareness would do, instead of simply acknowledging a miss and giving credit where it was undeniably due, he doubled down. Every time Clark's name came up, he followed the same playbook, a compliment, on the surface with something underneath designed to take the shine down a notch. He called her fearless, said she played like a kid on a driveway. It sounds warm until you sit with it, because what it's really saying is that her brilliance wasn't built, it was accidental, that her dominance wasn't the result of years of obsessive preparation and relentless refinement. It was just a girl goofing around and getting lucky. He pulled comparisons out constantly. Every time someone tried to put Clark in a lane by herself, Paige Bueckers appeared in the next sentence. Every compliment came with a tether, a reminder that the real stars in his version of events still wore UConn blue. Outside that version of events, reality was moving fast, and it wasn't asking for his approval. Then in June 2024, he stopped being subtle. On a national platform, he went directly at Clark's fan base. He called them disrespectful. He called them unknowledgeable. He called them stupid. His specific complaint was that fans believed Clark could finish in the top 4 of MVP voting in her rookie WNBA season. That belief to him wasn't enthusiasm or hope or the kind of passion that any league would beg to have attached to it. It was stupidity. Think about who those fans were. Parents bringing their daughters to a professional basketball game for the first time. Kids wearing number 22 because she made them feel like the sport was made for them. Casual viewers who had never cared about women's basketball until Clark made them care. Geno Auriemma looked at all of that and decided it was an embarrassment. Clark said nothing publicly. She didn't post. She didn't give interviews where she took shots back. She went to work. Rookie of the year, first team all WNBA. And when MVP voting came out, she finished exactly 4th, right where the stupid fans said she would. Every dismissive word Geno had ever said collapsed under the weight of those results. The gatekeeper role he had carried for decades started slipping, and he could feel it. So he made one more move. There was a new league being launched called Unrivaled, a 3-on-3 concept co-founded by Brianna Stewart and Nafisa Collier, with Geno involved behind the scenes. It had money, it had names, it had ambition. What it didn't have was a reason for casual fans to care, and everyone connected to it knew there was exactly one player alive who could solve that problem instantly, one name that could turn a niche concept into a mainstream event just by showing up. They made Clark an offer worth over $1 million for 8 weeks of play, one of the largest deals ever presented to a women's basketball player. The irony was almost too much to process. The man who never called her when she was 17, the man who told her she should have chased him, the man who spent years publicly softening every compliment he gave her while calling her supporters idiots. That man was now standing with his hand out, needing her signature to save his project. The power had completely reversed, and everyone could see it. When the offer reached Clark, she didn't see an opportunity. She saw the whole story. She saw every backhanded compliment. She saw every comparison designed to keep her from standing alone at the top. She saw a man who had spent years trying to shape her narrative finally admitting, through the size of that check, exactly how wrong he had been the whole time. And she said no. No drama, no press conference, no explanation designed to embarrass anyone. Just no. That single word carried more weight than anything she could have said in an interview or posted online, because it proved something that couldn't be argued with. She didn't need him, not his league, not his backing, not his version of respect that only arrived once she had already built everything without him. She had her own lane, and she had built it from scratch, starting from the moment a phone that should have rung never did. The people who watched that decision unfold understood what it meant, not just for Clark, but for every athlete who has ever been dismissed too early, underestimated, too casually, or made to feel like they needed permission from the establishment to be taken seriously. The gatekeepers of any sport, any industry, any world carry their authority right up until the moment someone proves they don't need it. And when that moment comes, it doesn't arrive with a speech. It arrives with a quiet, devastating choice that makes everyone reassess. Who actually holds the power? That's where we are now. The ripple effects are still spreading. Leagues are being built and reconsidered. Broadcast deals are being rewritten. Young athletes are watching and learning that the path forward doesn't have to run through whoever has held the keys the longest. The question that hangs over everything now isn't about Clark. Her story is already written in a way that time won't touch. The question is, what comes next? Which other institutions are about to discover that the players they overlooked built something so large that the only move left is to come asking for help? And when that moment arrives, who among those players will be ready to look back, remember every phone call that never came, and say no with the kind of calm that only comes from knowing exactly how far you've traveled on your own?